Greetings, Corpse Clubbers, and welcome to another episode of Corpse Club, the official podcast for DailyDead.com. My name is Heather Wixson, and I am one of your co-hosts. And for this week's episode, I am joined by Emily von Seele.
Hey there.
I got it right. Yay! It's a little joke that we have that I'm apparently terrible with Emily's name for some goofy reason, even though it's like right there in front of me.
The thing is, everybody's terrible with my name, so it's cool.
It's because you're so special. And
so,
it's not meant for us mere mortals. But yes, so Emily is joining me for this week's episode, and we are going to jump into all things Elvira. Emily decided, I always give my guests the opportunity to sort of pick what they want to talk about. And Emily was like, let's talk about the Elvira movie. And I was like, hell yes. And then I thought it'd be kind of cool to sort of talk about Elvira as a person as well, just because I am one of the olds, as we say on the internet. And Elvira was huge in my childhood. And I grew up watching her show every weekend, and getting to see her make a movie was fantastic. And the fact that here she is, gosh, some 40 years later, and we're still talking about her is a testament to who she is as a person, as a personality, and her impact on the genre as a whole. So Emily, you mentioned the Elvira movie. So you mentioned that you'd recently watched it. Was this a first time watch for you, or were you rewatching it?
Somewhere in between. So I know that I had watched it when it first came to home video when I was a kid. I know that my parents rented it, and I saw at least half of it. I don't remember if I stayed up for the whole thing or if I was forced to go to bed, but this was my first time watching it and really understanding it and following the whole thing. I watched it on Shudder, and so yeah, it was more or less a first time watch just because it was really sinking in. And when I was a kid, I wouldn't have understood the humor anyway. So it was so fun. Like, it was so crazy fun. And it's like one of my favorites now.
It's interesting because I didn't rent it. I actually saw it. They premiered it on NBC, which I always think is really fascinating because this movie sort of came together because at the time, I know that they were talking about starting to do like an Elvira series on NBC.
Really?
Yeah, and it was Brandon Tartikoff, who was very much sort of the figurehead of NBC for years. He had wanted to bring Elvira to do like a sitcom, which holy crap, that would have been amazing, right? Like, that would have been my favorite show.
I want this.
Especially at like 10 years old. Like, if you would have given me like a back-to-back, and I know I'll get crap for this, but like give me back-to-back Elf and Elvira, and I would have been like in heaven as a kid. But he actually was part of the reason they were able to kind of pull the financing together for the movie. And I think ultimately then it ended up at New World Pictures, which is, one of my favorite little production shingles, that started off with Roger Corman and eventually, got into different hands. But basically, it was Brandon Tartikoff, which, sort of helped facilitate this movie, which is why at the end of the movie where it says like an NBC production, and as a kid, I only really remembered like the New World Pictures at the beginning. But as I went back and revisited, I was like, NBC production, like, okay, that was weird. But it kind of makes sense because this is sort of a very NBC friendly, like, production itself, because like the director, James Signorelli, like he was a Saturday Night Live guy for, I want to say like almost 40 years.
Interesting. That also makes sense given how it's a really safe movie in terms of humor. Like it's listed as a PG-13 rating, but like all of the humor in it is very like innuendo based. There's no cursing.
Yeah, the sexiness is very demure sexiness, which is kind of interesting. Which is probably like why as a kid it was okay for me to watch Elvira, because obviously she comes out with her cleavage all out in the front and stuff, as we call it cleavage in our house, and so you'd think like parents would be like, well, you can't watch this woman, like, but yet I had a ton of friends who used to watch Elvira when we were kids. And I think that's like one of the strengths of this movie is that it almost feels naughty, but it doesn't quite venture into the too naughty territory.
And that makes sense. Like, given my parents, they were really cautious and they were really careful about what I was allowed to watch. So I didn't get to watch real horror until a lot later in life. But that makes sense that I would be allowed to watch this given that context.
Yeah, and it also makes sense too because, like as I mentioned, like the first time I saw it was actually on NBC. It was a few years later, and I want to say it might have been. I think it's either in late '89 or '90 is when they broadcast it on the network. And I was like, first of all, I was like, how did I miss an Elvira movie? Even at the video store, somehow I missed it being there. And I don't like now looking like when I watch it now as an adult and thinking about what I saw as a kid, I don't really think anything was edited in the movie. Like maybe the scene where everybody starts sort of making out with each other was a little cut down, but ultimately like that's the riskiest part of this movie. And it's like, it's nothing.
Yeah.
It's like nothing.
Especially by today's standards. Like this is a like G-rated movie, good fun for the whole family.
Yeah. And I think for me, what I think is super fun about it too is because I'm a sucker for movie locations. And this was actually shot at Warner Brothers Studios on their Main Street lot, which is also where Lost Boys during like the church scene was shot. The climax of Monster Squad was also shot in the same area as well. And so for me, because like Warner Brothers sometimes would do like these Halloween events and they would set it up around Main Street. So it's almost like you're like living in the Elvira movie, which is kind of fun. But I remember the first time I went to the Warner Brothers lot and I saw like, and they did like a tour or whatever, and they were talking about like, oh, and this is where we shot Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, and it wasn't just like part of the movie, like the movie was shot there. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. And they're like, this is where we burned her at the stake. This is, the bed and breakfast area. This is, where the bowling alley was. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. So if you ever go out to LA and once things, go back to whatever normal will be in the future, if you ever get a chance to go to do a Warner Brothers tour, like that's one of the highlights for me was just being able to like be in the area where like, the kids are from Lost Boys are running into the church to, fill up their tanks with holy water, or Horace is taking on the creature, in Monster Squad, and we're watching, Frankenstein getting sucked away. But then ultimately, it's all Elvira, which is pretty awesome.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I get nerdy about that stuff. I think that's one of the, I realize there are some perks to living in California, beyond the, high rents and all the other problems that we have. But I'm just such a sucker for movie locations. So if I can go somewhere and like see stuff that I know from movies, like I just get really excited. So for me, that was like, okay, that made touring Warner Brothers like worth it. So, and what I don't know if you like, cause did you ever watch the actual Elvira show?
I don't think so, but I was pretty young at this time. I think I was like 6 maybe, but she was enough of a presence in the media that I knew who she was. So even without watching the show, like she was around and she was doing commercials and I think she was just there and I was always able to identify her. And then the neighbor across the street had like this cardboard cutout of her and he put it in the window, which is kind of weird.
Amazing, though.
Yeah, and so like it didn't freak me out exactly, but it confused me because I'm like, Mom, there's a woman outside in the neighbor's window and she just stands there all day. And my mom had to explain to me that no, this is like a poster, it's not real. And I'm like, oh, okay.
That's amazing. This is one of the funny things. So years ago, when they did Being John Malkovich, they did a Chicago premiere for it, and they gave to everybody in the crowd that night a John Malkovich like paper mask. And this totally reminded me when you said Elvira was in your window. And so we would me and my ex used to keep the John Malkovich mask in this window of our front door. So I'm sure we scared the crap out of our postal worker like so many times. He also was like a tree topper one year for us. Like I have it still somewhere because I think it was just really funny. And like we would like, sometimes we would take it and like jump out at each other and be like, maybe John Malkovich and stuff like that. Cause I've always been a weirdo. But I also have a cardboard cutout of The Rock
That's awesome.
That I've now had for, 20 years. And he was very much a fixture. Like if we were having a party, we would always have to do something to decorate Dwayne in the house.
Well, naturally, because you want him to be part of the festivities.
Well, I don't want to leave him out. That seems
that's
right.
rude.
But sometimes we would put him in the window. I remember when it was the reason I ended up doing a short film actually centered around my cardboard cutout of The Rock. Is because when I first moved to LA, he was in like the hallway of my apartment in the middle of the night. He used to scare the crap out of Brian. And so like we were like, well, we have to do something with it. So that's why I ended up doing a short film that basically was built around my cardboard cutout of The Rock. So I love cardboard cutouts. I think we need more of them. I think that needs to be brought back. But I love that your neighbor had an Elvira one because I would have been so jealous of that as a kid.
It was so cool once I figured it out.
That is amazing. But yeah, I think what's really great about this film in particular, I mean, obviously, it's a really good showcase for who Cassandra Peterson is as a performer. And it gives us a better sense. Like, there's one thing of seeing like her quips between sections of movies and stuff like that, because, you know, she obviously had a great sense of humor. But to me, this really solidified her as being a really funny and smart person. And I don't know if it necessarily clicked that much with me as a kid because I already worshipped her as a kid. But as an adult, like, you just really get to see her become something more fleshed out than just a personality. And hopefully that makes sense.
It really does. And it was I was excited to check this movie out as an adult, but I was also a little bit wary just given the difference in the political climate between then and now, the difference between, gender politics, all of that. I was a little bit worried going in that she would wind up being kind of the sexualized butt of the joke. But it didn't work like that because she was in on every joke and she has so much control over how she's portraying this character and her role in the story that it felt like she was never being made fun of because she was right there with the humor the whole time. Does that make sense?
No, totally. And I think what's great too is, I guess I didn't realize, like, as a kid, and again, I was lucky because I also grew up in Chicago where we also had Svengoolie, as a horror host for us as well. But for me, like, as a girl growing up, where most of my friends thought I was weird because I wanted to always watch horror movies, it was just really nice to have a female presence representing horror and being really strong about that. Like, she didn't have to hide what she did. Like, she was proud and she knew her stuff. And I guess I didn't realize, like, until I got older, and I actually got to interview her a few years ago, like, just how much that meant to me as a kid, because it there's a really great level of assertiveness that comes with the character of Elvira. Like, she doesn't take crap. She's okay with calling people out on their BS and sort of their closed-mindedness. And I think that, to me, like, it was just nice to see that. Like, she, yes, she was sexy and she was, showing off some of her attributes, but she was so much more than that. And I think that's, like, the best part of her was just the fact that, like, for maybe a lot of us, girls growing up who liked horror, like, she was somebody we could look up to and aspire to be, And actually, I was actually a Elvira my senior year of high school for Halloween, only because I got out of the house without my mom seeing my costume.
I'm going to inject here because when I was about 6 years old, I told my mom that I wanted to be Elvira for Halloween. And she told me, no, I couldn't because I didn't have Elvira's legs, but she meant boobs.
She meant boobs. Totally.
She meant boobs. Still an odd thing to say to a 6-year-old on why you can't be Elvira, but I just kind of accepted it and moved on.
But also, how adorable was baby Elvira in that movie? Like,
oh my God!
As much as like I want Elvira collectibles, can we get a baby Elvira collectible? Because if you gave me like a living dead doll of baby Elvira, like I would buy that. I don't collect.
Oh my God, I would be in heaven. And this is probably a good reason why I'm not having kids, because I would dress my kid up as Elvira just on a Tuesday just to entertain myself.
Right? Get the little wig and put the makeup on, and all the other parents look at you and you're like, what?
Like, what?
Yeah, my mom was kind of, it was interesting, like because I always bought my own clothes in high school and stuff like that, but there was certain things where she was kind of like, about cleavage and things like that, she'd be like, no, I don't think so. So I remember she actually had to work that night, because Halloween I think fell on a Saturday that night, and I was so happy because I found this dress like at the Goodwill store, and I kind of made like the cut down into it. So it went from Morticia Addams down into Elvira very quickly. And I was so glad she wasn't home, because I would have not been able to leave the house.
That is so awesome.
God bless gravity when you're young, because I don't know if I could pull it off these days. I'll tell you what. Like, I was like sitting there last night. I was like, no, I think my Elvira days are over. I was like, definitely like more Morticia Addams at this point, where I'm like, we'll just cover them up at this point.
And it still looks fabulous.
Right? Everybody looks good in a long black dress. So I think is the moral of the story to that.
Oh, yes. Everyone needs to have one.
But yeah, and it's like it was funny because like when I talked to Cassandra years ago, like I had done a ton of research into her, and I was really fascinated by like her story, because like, she basically was a Vegas showgirl. She
Mm-hmm.
and she dated Elvis, which is like bananas to me. Maybe bananas and peanut butter on a sandwich, bananas.
All of the above.
Yes. And so that was like, wow, that's pretty interesting. And then she like went and started doing comedy at the Groundlings, which I was like, what? And it makes so much sense. And that's why I think that character endured, where it was something that could translate into a movie, because it was so well thought out, and it was nice to be able to see that in a much bigger platform than maybe her TV series was giving her at the time.
Yeah.
So, but I knew none of that. Like, really, I just knew she was awesome as a kid. If you notice, like there's quite a few of the Groundling members in this movie. So, immediately, like once you have Edie McClurg in a movie, it's already 3 stars there. But then when you pair her up with Elvira, like you're 4 stars out the gates.
Yes. Yes. All of their interactions are so perfect.
It's so great, and it's so empowering too. Like I just, as somebody who grew up like kind of getting browbeat for the things that I loved, whether it be wrestling or horror, like it was just nice to see somebody who like stood their ground.
Yeah, and just owned it and didn't care when they were being given crap, because she's going to do her thing no matter what you think.
Yeah, and it's like it's interesting because like the character of Bob, I always think is kind of funny, because he's so the opposite of Elvira, and like God bless him, but like, is he the most interesting love choice in that movie? Like,
No,
not really. But he's good. Like he's enough.
Yeah, he's kind and he cares and he's not a jerk.
Yeah. But he's kind of like watching paint dry, I guess. But I did remember, because my mom used to watch like all like the network soaps at night. And I remember him from, oh God, it wasn't Dynasty. I want to say, oh, you know what it was? It was Falcon Crest. That's the one I was thinking of, because it wasn't Dynasty, as we call it in our house. He was actually on Falcon Crest for quite a run. But he's a nice actor. He seems like a really nice guy. But boy, it was such an interesting character to have her bounce off of, because he seems so just normal, and his name is Bob. No offense to Bob's out there, but his name is
Bob. He's Vanilla Bob.
Vanilla Bob. It's amazing. And and the thing is, like, I didn't even realize, like, again, as a kid, like, how much this really is a celebration of B-movie culture, horror in general, like, obviously, because you have, Uncle Vincent Talbot, and it's interesting because, like, as a kid, I didn't put together the Talbot aspect of it from Wolfman.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, oh, that is so smart. And he walks with a cane, just like they did in the Wolfman. And it's so interesting when you can watch things like through like an adult lens, because it really kind of changes the whole thing for you sometimes.
Yeah, it's so much fun to be able to go through and pick up on stuff that you just didn't have, the vocabulary to understand when you were younger.
No, absolutely. And I also remember when I saw this the first time as a kid, I was so excited because Ira Hayden, who is in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3. I'm totally blanking on his name, but he's the Wizard Master.
He's the wizard!
Yes, and when he shows up in this, I, like, as a kid, I was like, oh my God! Like, I was so excited. And, he's got a pretty decent part. But I like the fact that, like, it's a good-natured movie. With a good message to it. And when I was like looking things up, I was like, wow, this movie really was poorly received. Like, what is wrong with people?
I don't like that. That makes me unhappy.
It does. Like, were they afraid of fun? Like, what is wrong with the people, like, that just watched this movie and, like, were like, this was terrible? Like, is it? I don't think
it's great. Like, it's super silly, and that's what I like about it. Like, it is a goofy humor, but it's a humor that the characters and the world can exist in so perfectly.
No, absolutely. And it also, like, it was one of those, like, where it made me want to, like, I would never inherit, like, an old mansion or anything like that, because nobody in my family has money. But it made me want to, like, buy, like, an old house and fix it up somehow.
Yeah, and then, like, secretly be this mighty witch.
Right? Like, we're deep down, we're all powerful witches. We have to admit that.
We just have to find our strength.
Definitely. And I also, like, after rewatching the movie, I'm like, now I want to, like, dye parts of Winnie's hair. Make her, like, into the punk rock goddess that she is.
Yes, I want pictures.
Yes, because I always see people who do that to their dogs. And I was like, oh, that's so mean. I was like, is it though? Because now I'm thinking about it. Quarantine gives you way too much time to think about things that you used to not think about. Where you're like, oh,
and that could be good or bad. We have yet to see.
Yeah.
Time will tell on all of the strange decisions that we make. But you know what? For now, we're just going to do it.
Yeah. Well, it sucks because, like, this was one of the movies that kind of came out towards the end of New World Pictures' reign in the 80s. And unfortunately, it was this movie, and I think Heathers ultimately ended up being sort of the nail in the coffin. And I think it was like the last year of the movies that they were releasing basically ended up, like, sort of getting swept under the rug. And so they, originally they had planned, like, this huge release for this film, and ultimately it only ended up being in, like, a couple hundred theaters. So honestly, like, even if I would have had a chance to see it in the theater, I don't know how prolific it would have been, like, or not prolific, but how many screens it actually would have played on in the Chicago area.
Yeah.
Because I think maybe it had, like, 200 screens or something like that, which is pretty sad. Because, like, Elvira,
that's tragic.
In the 80s, like, was still pretty much a huge figure, in pop culture. And I just think, like, maybe if they had done more, maybe the movie, like, it's a movie that people are still catching up to, I think, these days. And maybe we wouldn't have had to play catch up to it as much had New World Pictures sort of been able to do what they needed to do in terms of, like, releasing it. But thank God the NBC was at least there to put it on, on network TV of all time, places.
Yeah.
For us.
And it's kind of amazing, just given the fact that the movie didn't do that well, for a lot of people that would have been kind of, the figurative nail in the coffin for their careers. Like, you do the TV thing, you're this pop culture personality, but now you need to get into film. And if you can't do that, then you're just done. But the fact that, Elvira is still a figure in pop culture, and she's still a figure that we talk about. She's not around the way she was in the 80s, but she's still a presence, and we all know about her. So I think that speaks really, really strongly to Cassandra Peterson's, business savvy and her ability to keep this character relevant.
No, absolutely. And it's great too, because like, as a kid, like there's so many movies that I watched through her show that I never would have watched as a kid otherwise, because it was
like what? Like what?
So one of the first movies I remember watching was Dan Curtis's Dracula.
No.
Yeah, and I mean, I would have never watched that like in a million years.
Right.
Like, just
that's so cool.
And I remember also another movie that I watched was Legend of Hell House, and then I was like, oh my God, it's Roddy. Oh no, actually that was before. Yeah, that was before before Fright Night came out. Because I remember I was like, oh, I think I saw him in an Elvira movie, which is interesting because then he plays a horror host. So that was like two of the movies I can remember seeing. There was a lot of creature features. I feel like there might have been, I don't know if she did Food of the Gods. I don't remember exactly. I don't think she was Food of the Gods. I think I just saw that. I know the first time I saw Night of the Living Dead was because of her.
Oh, that's so cool. That is so cool.
Yeah, and I want to say, gosh, there was something else. I know there was like a creature feature. It might have been like one of the big ant movies that came out way back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
That was also because of her. But I think that to me was like, yeah, I can go to the video store and rent a Friday the 13th or a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. But she was such a good place to sort of find these movies that otherwise might get like overlooked a little bit. And so that for me was like, it made me realize that, you should, even though you have your favorites in the genre, like you should always go out and find things that you wouldn't always watch.
Yeah. And I think, sorry, I'm kind of going on the fly.
No.
I think that, because her show wasn't around, but as I got older, I was watching Joe Bob Briggs when he had his show on TNT and he was doing Monster Vision. And it was when I was in high school and I was really starting to get into horror. So I think that having the concept of a horror host introduce you to these films that you wouldn't be watching. It's like a friend recommending something to you. You don't know anything about the movie, but you know something about the personality of the person recommending the movie. So you're more likely to kind of give this thing a shot, Yeah.
Because I mean, it's like, would I go watch, I know, what? Another one I can totally remember was Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Which became like one of my favorites as a kid. And I was like so excited because I was like, wow, this is like a crazy title. And I actually made my mom watch it with me, I remember. And I like, as a kid, like would I have gone and rented that on my own? Maybe, but probably not. So just to have somebody out there like representing the movies like that to me is like super cool. And also what's really nice too is like, yeah, like sometimes she would like, joke about the movies and things like that, but it never felt like she was ever trying to insult those involved with the movies. Like she could call a movie silly, but she wasn't demeaning the film or its legacy. And I think to me that was important. And it made me sort of realize like there's a way to have fun with the genre, but still be respectful.
Yeah. And I think that the best fans, the best critics, the best everyone is able to kind of walk that line and just kind of understand that, yes, this might not be high quality, but that doesn't make it meaningless. It can still be a valid and important film and we can still enjoy it.
Yeah. And it's still entertaining,
Yeah. Yeah. We can have fun with it without, crapping all over it.
Yeah, one of my favorite things I remember, as I mentioned, like, growing up a kid who loved horror and loved wrestling, is that Elvira was actually one of the commentators for WrestleMania 2.
Oh, cool.
She was in Los Angeles because they did WrestleMania 2 from 3 different locations, if I'm remembering this all correctly. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was Chicago, LA, and New York. And she was in LA because I remember she was with Jesse Ventura and Lord Alfred Hayes. And I just thought, like, I was like, wait, you have a woman commentating on wrestling? Like, holy crap, that is super cool. Because, again, I grew up in watching basically men talk about wrestling. Like, that's all I ever saw as a kid. And to me, that was like the coolest thing ever. Was like, whoa, she's at WrestleMania and she's talking about it, and she sounds like she knows what she's saying, which is like, is there anything Elvira cannot do? And the answer is no. She can do it all.
She can do everything. She is a superhero.
Yeah, and I also think it's kind of cool that, she pops up in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. She's one of the biker chicks in that movie.
Yeah. Oh my God. So the first time when I was rewatching this movie for the first time since childhood, there was something about the way she moved in one scene, and it reminded me of the Pee-wee's performance. So I had to go back and look up and make sure. But yes, it was the same woman.
Yeah, because I guess Paul Reubens was supposed to have a cameo in this, which maybe that would have like elevated it a little bit. But he was working on Big Top Pee-wee and he couldn't get away, and things happen like that. But again, they were two people who became friends through Groundlings, which again is like kind of crazy. And I think I ultimately, and I guess I never realized this until like I was sort of digging around, that her persona is very Valley Girl. And I guess now that I sort of live out here and kind of talk that way, like I do a lot of totallys, I think it all really has clicked in my head where I'm like, oh my God, like that's why I loved her, because like she was like a goth Valley girl.
Yeah.
Where she was cool and having fun and being silly and, like whatever, man, and totally. And I was like, holy crap, like I've turned into that. Like I have very much I still have like a Chicago accent, but it's like Chicago Valley Girl now. Where the two have sort of merged, and I just catch myself all the time talking like a ridiculous person. So I just toned down. I do a lot of totallys and emails these days, and I'm like, oh no, your Valley Girl's coming out. Bring it back. Bring it back.
Rein it in a little bit, but not all the way, because it's still awesome.
Yeah, but I just think that's kind of cool. Like I never really realized like that was sort of her shtick. And I was like, that's really smart and clever, especially like in the 80s where everything about like California was sort of glamorized, obviously, in a way where like we all wanted to be there or wanted to like watch movies about it. And just the fact that she was able to sort of embrace this aspect of California, but ultimately still be this other type of person too. Like, I just think it's really fascinating to me.
Yeah, and it kind of lends another dynamic to the character. It would have been too easy to make this character kind of a blank, sullen, creepy goth lady.
Yeah.
And instead, she makes her a character who is, badass and tough and willing to have fun, but still draped in black, lots of makeup, loves, spiders and creepy things.
Yeah. And I also remember too, when I was in college, and I remember this was so funny because like nobody knew what the hell I was talking about, but I got super duper excited because it was like kind of when Adult Swim was sort of in its infancy stages, and she shows up on an episode of Space Ghost. And I remember like we were all supposed to go out that night, and I was like, well, I'm not leaving now because Elvira's on Space Ghost. And I made everybody wait like 30 minutes until I knew the episode was over and we were done, because I was like, there's no way I'm going to miss Elvira on Space Ghost. And everyone was just like, you are so ridiculous. I was like, I know, I don't care.
Oh my God, I would have hung out with you and not complained.
Well, thankfully, I made one of my best friends who lived next door to me. We started bonding over like 90210 in Melrose Place, and then all of a sudden, like I realized she was super obsessed with Halloween, the movie, and I was like, oh. So, and we also were both in the journalism program too. So, I got a nice friendship out of that. So we've been friends for like 24 years now. But like she wasn't going out with us that night, but I think she actually came over and watched with me. But like, I was like, there's no way I can go out and go drinking. Elvira's on TV.
Yeah, I have important things to do here. The beer will wait.
Yeah, like this is we can go get drunk and run from the cops later. Like,
right, this is college. We do that every night.
Absolutely. But yeah, and it's just it's one of those things where you kind of just look at all the different things she's been able to do, and it's like, she pretty much stayed busy, like consistently. I mean, she worked a little bit in the 70s, but I know that like that was like sort of like her showgirl era too. But like, she did a Bond movie, and she worked with Fellini, I want to say, at some point. which is kind of bananas. And then she just kind of made her own thing up. She kind of made a name for herself over here in the West Coast, and then just kind of was able to parlay that into a show, which is kind of rad. Like, to me, like that, seeing somebody who was able to sort of be a self-starter like that is so rare and so unique that you, like, if you can't respect that, like, get out of my face.
Yeah, especially back then, because this was pre-internet, pre-YouTube, pre-everyone just kind of doing their own thing, and hopefully somebody's watching. Like, she didn't have, a built-in audience and all of the resources. She was just kind of making it up as she went.
Yeah. And I also think what's kind of cool is, like, she was such a baller on this movie that basically, they had to buy the car so she could have this crazy, like, goofy goth car. And she basically, like, they buy the car, then they put all this work into, like, making the car. And at the end of the movie, because most times, like, productions would, like, they would keep it. And she's like, no, the car comes with me. And she still has it.
That's awesome.
And that is, like, what I call a baller move, because
yes.
Like, she was like, I'm going to take the car. And I mean, maybe it was in the contract or whatever, but, like, still, like, they put, like, a significant chunk of change into, like, making that car cool and look like the way it should look for her. And I just think that's pretty rad, where she was like, done with the movie. She's like, yeah, the car comes with me.
Yeah. So, nobody else should have that car.
No way. I would give anything to sit in that T-Bird and just take a picture, though.
Yes.
So if I had one wish, it would be to be able to sit in that T-Bird and take a photo. So if you're listening, universe, just putting that out there, when this is all said and done, if we can make that happen, I would be a very happy camper.
I think the universe should make this happen for you.
What's funny is I was reading this interesting story about how she was, because I guess she worked as a go-go dancer when she was underage, which is kind of bananas to me as well.
Yeah.
And apparently because, so she worked underage, and that's when she learned how to do her boob twirl, which is very, very important. The boob twirl really works well in terms of bringing the whole movie together at the end. And I read how, because she was underage, like, she wasn't allowed to do it with pasties because, she was, I don't even think she was like 16 years old at that point either. So this is kind of cool. Like, her mom had to create a special bra from, like, a bathing suit with tassels on it, so that way she could, like, learn how to do the tassel dance and swing her boobs the way that she does. But, like, I know my mom, when I was in a teenager, she never would have made me a boob twirling tassel bra. I don't know my mom, but my mom would have been like, you're out of your mind and now you're grounded for 2 months.
Mine too. I would have been grounded right alongside you. And then she probably would have called me crazy.
Yeah. Like, what are you talking about? But it's such a fun moment. And it's so interesting to me too, because it's like, again, like, you look at that end number and it's like, she's very, there's a lot of cutouts to her outfits. You got some big, staunch, burly men with, like, wearing leather and all sorts of 80s looking sort of accessories. And I feel like in any other movie, there would be like a super sexualized sequence. And I don't even feel like it is here.
No, it just feels like she's up there having fun. Like, she's owning everything and she's just having the time of her life. So you just sit there with, like, this big goofy grin on your face.
Yeah, it's one of those where I was like, oh, okay. Because I kind of had forgotten about, like, the music number at the end. And I was like, because I knew she gets to Vegas and I knew she gets to do her show, but I didn't remember, like, all the super specifics to it. Even though I just watched this, like, a few years ago when we did our Class of '88 stuff. But I was just like, wow, like, if you would have put this in any other movie, like, it would have immediately gotten cut down or something. But there's such a joy to her victory that it almost supersedes, like, the naughtiness.
Yeah, it feels like kind of a winking naughtiness rather than an in-your-face
explicit.
Like objectification.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me. Like, I was thinking about that. Like, who else was able to sort of get away with that stuff? Like, I can't think of anybody else who was able to be so quote unquote naughty, but yet still be so widely accepted as like harmless. I don't even know if I'm explaining that right.
Yeah, and it's a lot of it. You can see it in the way they chose to portray the character in the movie. Like, she's the kid's best friend. Like, she starts making friends with all the teenagers, and of course the snooty townspeople are really angry about that. But like, everyone's just hanging out together and they're just having fun. Like, I would freaking sit on the couch and have a beer with Elvira.
Oh, totally. And the thing is like I realize now, like being older and stuff, like I would totally just go hang out with like the teenagers or the 20-somethings, like, because like they're having all the fun. I think maybe that's like why I go to music shows that I go to, because most of the ages there's like maybe kids are 21 or just turned 21, and I don't feel weird because I'm just like there to have fun too. Although I'm sure they probably see me and they're like, "Oh, are you here with your kid?" Which sadly is mathematically not impossible. But yeah, I would totally like, I would hang out with like the younger kids more than I would hang out with like old stick in the mud people any day of the week.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Edie McClurg is amazing, but I would not hang out with her character.
Oh my God. And her name is so like the best, Chastity Pariah. I was just like, and I always think of like the line from Scream 3 was like, I don't even know what a pariah is, because when I saw this movie, I didn't know what a pariah was either. But I just knew it was something bad because of Edie McClurg's performance.
It's something I don't want to be.
Yes, pretty much. And I think what's also really fun about this cast too is like, you know, you have Kurt Fuller in here, who is like just the perfect scumbag for movies. I mean, he seems like such a nice guy, but he was just absolutely like the best sort of cinematic scumbag you could ask for.
Yeah, when we got to the scene where we're at the like town council meeting and he and Edie McClurg are sitting next to each other, my husband and I both pointed at the TV like, "This is perfect. Look at those two."
And it's funny because I also, again, I just watched this like a few years ago, but I totally sort of skipped over my head that Jeff Conaway was in this. And it was like, I kind of was like, oh, okay, I recognize that guy's face. And then until he did the comb through the hair, where I was like, oh my God, it's Kinnicky. the Hickey from Kinnicky. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so it's just, what I love is like, you know, that him doing the comb moment was such a nod to Grease, but as a kid, it went right over my head.
Yeah, you had no idea.
Although I don't know that I saw Grease in its entirety as a kid. I think it was like in high school and I finally saw it the whole way through. Because like it was funny. The first time I ever really watched Grease, I went over to my aunt's house, and she's like the best. She's like my mom's best friend, and she's been such a huge force for me. But like she's religious, and she, you know, has like sort of moral grounds and stuff like that. And to me, I didn't realize like how filthy Grease gets.
Yeah.
And her son at the time, who was like maybe 3 or 4, had sort of messed up their TV, so the closed captioning was stuck on.
Oh my God.
So in high school, I was like, oh, I'm going to go spend the night at Auntie's house. And I'm like, and she's like, oh, rent a movie. And I was like, oh, I'll rent Grease. It's a musical. We'll have fun. I was mortified while watching Grease with her. I was like, oh my God, I didn't even realize. Like when we got to Grease Lightning, I was like, oh my God, like I don't know if I could finish this movie with her. And she took it all in stride, like a champ. But I was like, oh my God, like what is going on here?
Like, it seemed so simple. It was set in the 50s when everything was nice, but no, this movie's filthy.
Yeah, it is a raunch fest. But yeah, so I was like, okay. So whenever we talk about like closed captioning, I always think of that because we always had to be careful about like the movies we watched with her, because like nothing slipped by when the closed captioning was on. And boy, you just haven't lived until you've had to sit there and look at the words of Grease Lightning flash by you as you're trying to, you know, pretend that they're not flashing by you. So
and suddenly, like, you want to do something in the room to try to distract everyone away from the screen.
Yeah, but how do you distract somebody for like the next 80 minutes? Because the whole movie just is like that. You know, where I was like, oh my God, this is a lot. So, but I guess that's the nice thing about Elvira is like you can watch that with the closed captioning and you're pretty much okay.
Yeah, like everything's good.
It was, and it's great to sort of see again this movie kind of come into its own now, which is such a case for like so many movies from the 80s, and I think we're getting to see it more with 90s movies as well too. Hindsight is always 2020, as I tell people. But it's like I know Arrow Video just recently put out like a big special Blu-ray for it, which I haven't been able to pick up, but I want to because I'd love to see some stuff on this. So it's nice to see like it's on Shudder. It's on a few other streaming services as well. It's getting special Blu-rays these days, and I think honestly, like, that's the testament. Like that shows you that this is a movie that has stood the test of time, and is still wholly in the zeitgeist of, the horror genre then and now.
Well said. Yeah.
I almost sounded smart there for a second.
You sounded so smart. I loved it.
Well, thank you. I want to say, because I know we were talking about this, it was really interesting because one of the reasons I ended up interviewing Cassandra Peterson a few years ago was that she was putting out this amazing coffee table book, which I was very, very grateful that I have a wonderful boss who maybe is hearing this as this plays, who actually got me the book for Christmas one year.
Nice.
And it's this thing probably, I actually have it sitting next to me because I wanted to look at it before we started recording. And it's mostly pictures, but it's really like there's like little things, like little stories here or there. It's interesting because like it goes through her career. It goes through like a lot of the concept art that they had for her, like over time, like in terms of like when she was first starting and like what her look would be. There are pictures from the movie as well. There's also a really great photo shoot that she did when she was pregnant with her daughter. And this is like this woman is such a warrior that she gave birth at the age of 43.
Whoa.
Her daughter Sadie was born when she was 43.
She is so badass.
And there is a really fantastic picture in the book of her daughter as baby Elvira, because we know we can't resist baby Elvira. It is so cute and sweet and wonderful. And it's such an interesting look. I know she's got an autobiography, I think that's due out later this year.
I really, really want to read that.
Yeah, but it's so cool, like just to be able to kind of see her career through pictures, because there's so many like different promotional photos I'd never seen before. Some of like sort of pinup kind of looking things. There was actually like an album that she was sort of associated with that was sort of like old kind of spooky songs. And she was actually like photographed for that. I don't know if you can even get the book anymore because it was a very limited run. And I don't even remember I'm looking as I say this, I don't even remember who the publisher was. I'm totally screwing this up right now as I do this. It's Tweeterhead Publishing. So I don't even know if they even have this book anymore. And actually it came out like 4 years ago because it was 2016. But if you have any way of getting it, if you're listening to this and you want some cool sort of Elvira iconic, like, photos and things like that, I can't recommend this book enough. It's really fantastic. And I think that was also the same year that might have been either her last year or her second to last year performing at Knott's Scary Farm.
Which she did for a while, right? That was like her yearly thing.
She did it a bunch, I think in the 90s, and then kind of went away and then came back in the 2000s. And it was really cool because we actually got to go, Jonathan and his wife, Christy, were out in LA. So we actually all went to her show, which was super fun. And then we actually got to go backstage afterwards and take a photo with her, which of course made it to my Christmas card that year. The very first thing, like when my mom called to tell me she got my Christmas card, she's like, "Oh my God, was that Elvira?" And I was like, "Yes, it was." So she was super excited because she just thought that was like, it was like, "Oh, you got to meet, so and so and so. So who cares?" She's like, "Elvira?" Oh my God. So she was very excited about that.
This is how your mom knows that you've made it to the big time.
Yes, when you've met Elvira and gotten to take a picture with her while she's in costume, you have officially made it. So it's pretty much been downhill from there, which I think is pretty accurate. No, I kid. But it was so cool because it was a real a real live show with her running around and dancing. And I was just like, I was exhausted when I was done. And I was like, this woman is out here making us all look like fools with the amount of energy that she's bringing to the stage. And she is doing it like several times a week. Like that to me was just amazing. And, I was really glad I got the chance to experience that. I wish they'd put like a DVD of it or something so people who weren't in like this, in Southern California would have a chance to see it.
Yeah, I want to watch it.
Or even a compilation of like her shows from over the years, because I'd love to see some of the older stuff too.
Yeah.
So, I think it's just, and again, it's like, don't get me wrong, I love horror hosts in general, but how many of them have like actual live theatrical shows built around them?
Right. That's kind of a new level.
Yeah, that's the Elvira level. Like, no.
Yeah. We can all aspire to that. I want to be Elvira when I grow up. These are my new goals.
Me too, and I'm still, all things considered, like now realizing like where her age was when she was doing all these things, I was like, oh, okay, I still have some years to go. I can still do this.
Yeah.
Life is not over for you when you turn 40, apparently. So good.
Right.
Good on us.
Plenty of time.
Right. So, I guess that kind of sort of brings us to the end of everything. What would you say is sort of the most surprising part of you going back and rewatching this movie? I mean, if there was one, like in terms of, if there was a moment that was like, oh, whoa, like, was there anything that really stood out to you as like something you didn't recall or something that just seemed, interesting in terms of like the time it was released or anything like that?
The thing that really surprised me the most was, again, kind of comparing like memories to how you take in things now as an adult. I expected it to be fun, and it was. I wasn't expecting to identify with her so much and to take her away as, this badass, awesome role model for my grown adult self. Like, she just does what she does so perfectly well. And I feel like in watching this, like, I kind of made a friend. And truly, I want to be her when I grow up, because I think that she has so much control over who she is, over her character, over how she represents that character. And she, as a woman, I find so much power with her. And I wasn't expecting that. I was just kind of expecting a fun movie on a Tuesday night. But I'm like, there's this badass woman and she's a big horror nerd just like me.
And I think also, too, there's something to be said, especially during that era of horror where, we sort of accuse the 80s sometimes of like not giving, female characters agency or sort of dismissing some female characters. I mean, obviously there's always exceptions to the rule, like Ripley and things like that. But I think it's really interesting that, if nothing else, Elvira really stands out because she was so against the norm for what we expected of things in our horror entertainment.
Yes, and she was able to be that while still being this very sexy, voluptuous woman.
Absolutely. And it's so fun. Like, I want in 30 years for people to still be talking about her. Like,
I think we will. I think it's going to happen.
I hope so, because I think she deserves that. And I think, in terms of, again, being in sort of this male-dominated culture, for her to be able to not only hold up on her own, but also raise the bar in ways that people got to have sort of control over who they were and how they were presented, I mean, I think is really phenomenal. And I mean, as you mentioned, it kind of gave you something to look up to. And honestly, like, I think it sort of renewed my, my feelings towards her, because I knew when I was a kid, like, she was super cool and I wanted to be like that, but I didn't know why I wanted to be like that. And I think now, as an adult, now I do.
Yeah, you see it a different way.
Yeah. So, I think if nothing else, like if you're listening to this and you need sort of that personal rallying moment right now in your life because you're feeling a little lost or maybe you're feeling a little powerless, go watch Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, because I guarantee by the end of it, regardless of gender, regardless of, where you come from, I think you're going to feel really good about yourself once you come out of this movie, because I think it's very empowering, even despite its silly facade.
Really well said, Heather. I fully agree.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. High fives.
High fives. Virtual high fives.
Virtual high fives.
So yeah, I don't know that we have much else to say. So I guess we can go ahead and wrap up. But Emily, thank you so much for doing this. This was amazing, and I'm so glad you were able to join me this week.
Thank you, Heather. This has been the highlight of probably the past 2 months of my life. And I had so much fun geeking out over Elvira with you. She's amazing, and you're amazing.
Oh, well, you're amazing too, and all of you guys out there are listening are amazing as well. Let's just have an endless love fest.
Yes.
There's a lot of negativity in this world right now. Let's bring a little positivity in, and just everybody just realize that you have the power in you to, be this strong, confident person. So just go out there and crush it. Because that's what Elvira would want. So, and I guess I'll do all of my business now that we're wrapping up. So for those of you who are listening and have been supporting Corpse Club from the very beginning, we really appreciate you. For those of you who maybe are listening for the first time, if you'd like to check out more about Corpse Club, you can visit us over at corpseclub.com. And be sure to head over to dailydead.com for all of your news, reviews, interviews, and fun features over there. You can also find us over on Twitter at Daily Dead News or at Corpse Club. Be sure to let us know how you feel about Elvira, the movie, memories you might have growing up with Elvira, or maybe you're just totally new and you're discovering her now, which is amazing. And I guess there's really nothing else to say at this point except for until next time, everybody, stay scary and unpleasant dreams.